My name is Trina Cleveland. I have been a survivor of many things. As a teenager, I grew up in a home with my grandparents. I didn't really know why my siblings and I were living there, but we lived in a neighborhood. My, family's very religious, very church oriented, but our neighborhood was small. Of course, eventually I found out that my mother, who I was always told had died of a heart attack, and that was why we were living there, actually killed herself. So I started running away. As I started running away and, going in and out of institutions, because my family would always come, get me and, place me in an institution or juvenile or something like that. I ran into a woman who, first of all, molested me when I was 13 years old. Not only did she molest me, she shot me up with 10 cc's of. I always tell people I did not get addicted right away, but I never forgot that feeling. Later on, as I continued to run away, I, encountered street people, and having to do the things that we do to survive on the streets. Eventually got stabbed when I was 16 years old by a lady who actually stabbed me in my throat. And I've always experienced a lot of larynx issues since then. But yeah, that's one of the things that happened to me while, on the streets and, being young and prostitution and just different things living that life. There are several, what I like to say, compound traumas that I've experienced on the streets, from domestic violence, being in those relationships with pimps and, just the different things that I've experienced. Like I said, domestic violence, rape. I don't know how deep I can be on this, but just some of those things that happen when you are a female and you're addicted to a substance. I was raised in a really religious household. And so, church was every day. But, I tell people every night somebody in the house got molested. And so molestation started happening early on in the home. In most communities, we just sweep it under the rug or we don't talk about what happens in the house. And so basically that is what led to a lot of the beginning of me running away and making choices and hanging around these people that I found in places I was always told not to go, just because out of hurt and pain and just the things that were going on in the household, living in the household where religion was taught and pushed down our throats. Yet, like I said, every night someone was molested. And it wasn't me. I wasn't per se the victim. One of my siblings was, but everything that the perpetrator did to my sibling did to me. And these are the kind of things, when I say, led to me thinking that was what love was. Like, I will let you do what you wanted to do to me. I will suffer silently. Being raised and taught what, God is, love is, don't lie, don't sin. And then at night, this is happening in the home. It actually played a very big part in my mental setup. The very first time I was introduced to I used to babysit for a lady in the neighborhood, and I only would go to her house because she would allow me to smoke cigarettes. And I didn't know that she was an intravenous user. I just was around 13 years old, and I was just a place of escape and a place that I could smoke cigarettes. And I remember clearly, I'll never forget one evening she came in. It was later than normal. The street lights were already coming on, and there was one rule that we had in our home is that you had to be in by the time the street lights came on. And I knew that I was going to get in trouble, but she came in, she was very authoritative, and I kind of just followed and did exactly what she was told. What I was told, she was the adult. Long story short, she took me into her bathroom and shot me up with 10 cc's. And I remember when she pulled out the needle, I was really scared. And she was like, no, this is okay. You're going to do this. And I did it because, again, she was the adult. And I will never forget, as soon as that entered my system, like, everything was beautiful. She, who had track marks up and down her body, was just like, everything was all right. The pain I was going through at home was all right. Nothing mattered. Everything was just beautiful. And it was only 10 cc's. So if you know anything about and quantities and measurements, you know that's not very much. But when you're 13 years old and you've never had anything in your system, I never forgot that feeling. I started having babies, and in that time of having babies, that's what happened. Like my first child, she was taken, and today I can honestly say she was taken for her good. But, at the time, she was taken. I thought I was doing the best I could when really I wasn't. I was addicted. And one of the things I realized is that, I couldn't raise children from the bathroom getting And that was the first child that was taken from me. Again, I was raised by my grandparents who really didn't know a lot about the system or legal procedures or anything like that. So I didn't have anyone to help me be represented in court. Mentally, it changed me. It really changed me. It was the first thing that had really been taken away from me, that was a part of me, literally, that I knew and had bonded with. So it would had a huge impact. Again, another compound trauma. I did want to say that her father and I, we were teenagers, high school sweethearts, and we began fighting. And I remember the physical abuse started all because of me. Like, I remember the very first time he hit me, I pushed him to do it. And after he did it, and he was so aghast that he'd done it, and I got the apologies and the I'm sorries and I will never do it again, it forced me to do it more, because that's when I got that love. So that, again, early childhood, early teenage years, early time in my life, that kind of set up the pattern for the rest of my adult life. And as a teenager, I would get in and out of relationships with these men. The relationships would turn abusive. I kept having babies thinking, oh, if I have this baby, it would keep the guy. It just ended up with me losing my children, either the father taking the child, my family stepping in and taking the child, and finally social services coming in and taking my children. And it just became a pattern. For the first few times, I was so numb from the that I could never actually really feel the fact that my kids were being taken away. My kids were taken away 5 times by social services. I did win them back 6, but the fact that they were taking 5 times, it kind of lets you know, or explains that emptiness and that numbness that I felt. I couldn't feel when they were taken away. I didn't feel it. But at some point when they were gone, I just knew that they were missing me. I knew that they were crying for me. And I just, no matter how much I had, no matter who was around, how much money was there, I had to get my kids back. And that always sent me back to get my kids. And I would always go back to get them because I knew that they were missing me, but I was still missing me. I was still missing me. I remember when I was going with a guy in the neighborhood who was a dealer. And this is one of the things that I realized, that back then, it was just really something totally different when you're dating an older guy. I think today it's called sex trafficking. Back then, I just know that several people in my neighborhood, guys, would be like, okay, she's mine this week, you can get her next week. And kind of was doing that throughout the neighborhood for most of my teenage years. So around the age of 16, I was dating another, dealer guy in the neighborhood, and asked me to come over. He said, a lot of people come over to his house to sell their. I was new at selling, didn't know the game, didn't know that I was being set up. And I actually walked into his house to set up shop. And at that time, I was really green. I knew that there was a woman there, didn't know that she was his other woman. I thought I was the woman. She eventually just out of nowhere ran from behind me. She pulled my braids and she began fighting me. And as I was fighting her, he starts to help her, and they both beat me up. She stabbed me so many times in my back and shoulders. And then she stabbed me in my throat. And when she stabbed me in my throat, it tore part of the esophageal gland. And so as a result, I'll get hoarse really easy, like if you can hear that. And years later. So I was in such adrenaline. In fact, I know that at one point I looked down and I saw the knife go in my side. I saw it come out and I saw the blood on the knife. When I woke up from the hospital and I looked there was not even a scar there. So that was one of the things that to this day is a mystery for me. But yeah, I was running on pure adrenaline. I was bleeding out. I crawled out of their house. They lived right by a corner store. I walked into the corner store and I just know that an ambulance was called. Sad thing for me, when I got into the ambulance, once they saw they couldn't get veins on me, because at that time I was shooting intravenously. The ambulance, the workers, the EMTs, it wasn't a really hurry help thing. It just became she's another type of thing. And I just felt being mishandled and mistreated roughly and just like not understanding like what's going on here. And I didn't realize even then that I had been stabbed so many times. We're still working on mending our family. I do have a relationship with, some of them and some of my grandkids, and some of them I don't have any at all, but I am still hopeful. I today just stay ready so that when they come back, I'm ready and I'm here and I'm available for them. I was molested by a lady in the neighborhood. That was my very first time being molested when I was shot up with, but it wasn't the first time. It was the first time I used. But prior to, my uncle molested my sister, and everything that he did to her, she did to me. I remember I was 4 years old, and I saw a shadow standing above my bed. And the way we slept when we were younger, because, we lived in a little house and, we were taken in. My sister and I shared a twin bed, and she slept with one way and I slept the other way. And I just kind of sat up and I saw this shadow, and I was trying to adjust my eyes to the darkness, and I saw someone bending over the bed, kissing my sibling, and I saw the cover going up and down, and I immediately got scared, and I started calling for my grandfather and my grandmother, and I just didn't know who it was, and they took off running to the back. And eventually I knew that it was an uncle because they never came back out of the room because I stayed up all night. I was so scared. They never came back out. I remember that particular uncle getting fussed at. They did eventually move him out of the home, but it was never talked about as a family, or not that I knew of. But until he moved out, which was, a couple of years, it took him a couple of years before they actually moved him out of the house. Every night, for years, he took her into the bathroom. So he wouldn't come into the room anymore. He would go into the bathroom, and I would stay up just waiting for her to come out of the bathroom because I was so scared. I didn't know what he was doing in there. But every time she came out, everything that he would do to her, she would come out and she would do to me. And again, like I would let her because I knew that she didn't have any control over what was being done to her, and I felt sorry for her. This is the 70s. So living with stern religious people who didn't talk a lot about sex or inappropriate touching or anything like that. I was never given those talks. Not at that time, not at that age. This is the very first time I realized I could feel sorry enough for someone else that I would suffer. I'm not going to tell on you. I'm going to take the pain. It's a line in my book also, and it says, I learned to suffer silently. So it's the first time, I guess, I learned that I could take a lot of pain. I could take blame for others. I could just suffer and still smile and still be a kid, but I wasn't. So I guess it's the first time I learned how to act, and I don't know. I guess I don't even know the word for it. I was 13 when I actually used the first, which was being shot up with. I didn't become addicted right away. I just never forgot the euphoric feeling. I never forgot that everything just became all right when I got it. Eventually, during the 80s came around, and I used for about more than 15 years. So I was in and out of mental institutions, rehabs, and in that process, every time I would, relapse, I'd lose the kids, get clean, go back and get my kids. And it just became a cycle of going to rehab or a mental institution and or coming back, getting my kids, and just kind of a vicious cycle that lasted for pretty much 20 years. I've spent 20 years in active addiction, 14 years in and out of prison. I was arrested 28 times in Travis County. So just had me in and out of institutions, whether they be mental institutions, criminal institutions, rehabs, just in and out of mental institutions. During this time, I kept having babies, thinking, oh, this man will fix it. This guy is going to fix it. And just, again, never really processing the fact that my children would one day grow up and grow older. The defining moment that really changed my life around was the last time I got incarcerated. I was incarcerated for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. I had been up for 2 weeks on a binge, and I stabbed a lady. I thought she took something from me, and I ended up stabbing her a few times. When I was let out on my bond before, they didn't have enough evidence to convict me at first. So I was let out on bond. During the time I was let out on bond, the very thing that I thought she took from me, which was a cigarette pack, it was found. And I realized then that I was out of control and that I love people. I don't know how it got from me loving people to I hurt someone seriously. And that was the thing that changed my life. I remember being in jail by the time I got rearrested for the crime. I remember praying and asking God, like, why do I got to do time? I understand now, but God, all the things that I've been through as a child, all the rapes, the molestations, everything that I've been through. Like, why do I have to go to jail for this? And I just will never forget. God spoke clearly to my heart. He said, because you did it. And I think that was the moment I realized that no matter what happens, I have a choice. I recently celebrated 13 years free from active addiction. I have written 6 books. I have published over 50 authors. And so I do have a business that I publish other authors' stories. I also am a stage playwright. I have traveled with my story of my life, which is based on my best-selling book, The Pink Elephant in the Middle of the Ghetto. We've run that play 22 times and are about to do it again. So today, I just make that my ministry. I connect with different mental health and substance abuse organizations to just deliver a message that, even though I don't have a degree, I still get back up again. I am an expert in get back up again. Mentally, spiritually, and physically, I am on the upswing. So I have an awesome support group. I don't formally attend 12-step meetings, but I have a lot of friends who do, and they support me and keep me accountable. I have a very busy lifestyle, but those things bring me joy. The things that I do as far as acting and theater and writing, it brings me joy. It's what I do today to just keep me floating and positive. I think the biggest thing that has helped me is once someone told me to free myself from guilt and shame, and to do that you have to move from shame to guilt. And I didn't understand that. They said, well, because shame means that you are a mistake, guilt means you made a mistake, and if you made a mistake, then you can forgive yourself. And I work daily on forgiving myself, and it's a daily thing. Some days I'm better at it than others, but I pay it forward. I get out of myself. Whenever I'm feeling down, I'll get out of myself and I'll look for other people to help. And what I always say is, what I try to do today is be the person that I needed. So after getting out of prison the last time, changing my life, I'd written my book in prison, and it was doing really well locally. From there, I started a nonprofit to help other parents like me. And then from there, I wanted to write a stage play. It was taken to see another play. And I thought, wow, I'd love to tell my story on the stage. And I wrote the stage play. I wrote all the music. And then on the night of the casting call, I had a near fatal car accident with me and my daughter and my grandchildren. She and I were both ejected through the sunroof. The car rolled over on me, and as a result, I had 32 broken bones. I did have to learn to walk all over again because my pelvis was cracked on both sides. My ribs were completely shattered. My lungs were punctured. My jaw was broken in 3 different places, several broken vertebrae in my back. My daughter was on a tube. She was on a ventilator. So it was a really bad accident. My grandchildren, however, thank God, were not seriously injured at all. We were found by some bikers who we had gotten in front of on the road. My car had rolled over in a ravine. The car actually had rolled over on top of me. Those bikers found us. They saved our life. And I remember just wanting to meet them and just to say thank you, because I never saw them. I couldn't. I was critical. But I remember hearing the motorcycles, and I remember smelling leather. And I wrote a Craigslist ad to find them just to say thank you, which, resulted in people going to my Facebook and finding out who I was, and then other things going viral. And as a result, I ended up not only just selling out my play, being able to do it multiple times in multiple cities, I have sold over 100,000 copies of my book. When I had the car accident, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what now? But by then, I had so much hope from being released from the bondage of addiction. I had so much hope and so much support and encouragement that I realized that that too was kind of part of God's plan, and that I was already conditioned for the rollout of the car. I previously led a lifestyle. I jumped out of many rolling cars with watches, rings, and wallets. So I was conditioned, for lack of better words. I was conditioned already. But one of the things that I knew is that God saved my grandchildren for a reason. I think he knew that was one thing I would not be able to get over. But emotionally, I had knew that God had already brought me through so much. There was no way he could bring me this far to say psych. Like, there was no way he could do it. And I had so much faith because I knew that if I could stop smoking, like, that was like the hardest thing in the world. I knew that if I could stop doing that, nothing could break me. Nothing can break me. When I woke up in my hospital room from the car accident and I opened my eyes, the very first thing I said was, I'm still going to do my stage play. And everyone was saying, no, you can't. And someone said, oh, just let her say it. But I did my very first stage play in a wheelchair. And the bikers who saved me were there.